All right, check the mic after dark. We just watched the Denver Broncos get the win over the Browns, 41-32. They're calling it the most Jameis Winston game ever, Sam, because it certainly was. Final tally for Browns QB Jameis Winston, 34 for 58 for 497 yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 2 of which went to the other team. I thought he was going to throw his 7th touchdown on that last play, but no, it's a game-ending interception. So yeah, crazy back and forth game here. Broncos survived to move to 8-5.
This was Jameis Winston's Mona Lisa. This was his Sistine Chapel. This was his magnum opus. This was the finest piece of artwork that Jameis Winston has ever put out onto the gridiron. The finest Jameis game we have ever seen. Like I told you before we went live, the only thing missing from it was when he got buried and smacked in the head and sacked by multiple Broncos. If he just found a way to kind of launch that backwards, over his head, fumbled it, that would have been literally perfect and absolutely no way he could have improved upon it. Absent that, there's always room. You're never going to get perfection. Nothing's ever perfect. You're never actually going to hit perfection. But if you strive for that, you can get really close, which is what this game was.
We'll talk about the Broncos as well. But it was a bad look. I know the Broncos had 2 pick sixes. The defense does that, right? It was a pretty bad performance by the Broncos defense. A lot of wide open receivers, clearly missing Riley Moss on one side at corner. Levi Wallace had a rough night. Everybody but Patrick Surtain basically getting picked on, but busted coverages left and right. But as this game's going, and I'm a Jameis believer, Sam. Even I, halfway through the game, was like, this is the season I was calling for Jameis Winston. And that was before the second pick six and before the game-ending interception. The game-ending interception didn't really matter a ton other than, hey, they score a touchdown. They have the onside kick opportunity. But it's just funny because Jameis is the guy. I'd say here are the mid-tier quarterback, Sam. Endearing term. The mid-tier quarterback is the guy. You just don't go to social media and make a comment about the mid-tier quarterback like a Jameis Winston, like a Jimmy Garoppolo. As soon as you compliment them, they make you look bad. Because I saw a lot of people saying, oh, this is why, I can't believe Jameis didn't have a job over the last couple of years. And I don't disagree. But this is what you're missing. You should have had Jameis. You should have started Jameis. You guys should have started Jameis. And then it's like, well, he reminded us as well the reasons why maybe he hasn't been a starter the last couple of years.
This is what I love about your Jameis Winston love is that you are Charlie Brown, right? And there's no volume of times where the ball cannot be put in front of you and you run up about to hoof it and Jameis pulls it away. Like, not again. It's going to happen every single time. This is the thing, right? He is busy tying Peyton Manning records for production. The one I sent you that Underdog tweeted out. Quarterbacks or most games in NFL history with 450 or more passing yards and 4 or more touchdowns in the game. Peyton Manning with 3 and Jameis Winston with 3. And obviously Jameis has done that on significantly fewer games at this point, despite putting his name alongside Peyton Manning in the record books. It's still fairly universally accepted that he does not belong as a starting NFL quarterback because of this. Because of the catastrophe plays. Because at halftime, they were trying to kind of walk Stefanski, into, hey, that was a pretty problematic pick six, huh? And it was like, Jameis has been making some good decisions other than that one. Obviously we'd want that one back. But generally, he's been making good decisions. And then another one, ridiculous pick six. And then right at the end, beautiful pass for pass interference. Could have theoretically been a touchdown to really help them and get them back on track. They get the pass interference, and then he just rolls to the left and fires the ball right to a linebacker. Like, he is capable of incredible positive plays, but they're never going to come without the corresponding catastrophes, and that is Jameis. That is the artwork that is Jameis Winston, NFL quarterback.
Still a net win. He's still probably QB 20 to 25 in the world. It's a net win in the end, I think, for Jameis. It's just the opposite of the game manager. And there's a reason why his teams give up. I mean, his teams give up a lot of points in part because, well, he's given them to the defense as well. But just look, a wild game. I thought Bo Nix stood in there. He made some huge throws as well. There was a point where back-to-back plays from scrimmage were a 93-yarder from Bo Nix to Marvin Mims and a 70-yarder from Jameis Winston to Jerry Jeudy. Just to touch on that as well, Jerry Jeudy with his 235 receiving yards, most ever by a player against his former team. And we know, it wasn't a great finish for Jerry Jeudy in Denver. So it was a legit revenge game for Jerry Jeudy. And I can't help but remember the play earlier where Jameis had like an 88 or an 89-yard touchdown with a wide open Jerry Jeudy. He overthrew him. That stuff happens. But if you tack that on to the 235 for Jerry Jeudy, I mean, he's knocking at the door. He's within 10 yards of the NFL receiving record in a game with Flipper Anderson's 335, 336, whatever that was. So Jeudy was unbelievable. And Elijah Moore was unbelievable in this game for the Browns as well.
Yeah, you're right. If they connect on that deep ball, and they should have, I mean, he was wide the hell open, and Jameis just overthrew him. Jerry Jeudy would have had a legitimate shot at the all-time single-game receiving record. As it was, just 235 yards with the touchdown, absolutely barbecuing Levi Wallace, who was the guy who was in for Riley Moss. Levi, who's been a solid corner in previous periods of his career, was just getting roasted start to finish in this game. They ended up benching him effectively for a rookie, but he was just getting cooked. Jerry Jeudy was fantastic. They exploited a ton of zone coverage, and for some reason, Denver never adjusted to, hey, if only we had a really good corner that we could put on this guy who's putting up 200-plus receiving yards, what would that look like? Well, maybe we could try it. Patrick Surtain over here is not doing much at the moment. How about we make that adjustment? And it never happened.
I wasn't tracking it specifically. I saw Mike Clay, former PFFer, former colleague at PFF, now with ESPN. He was saying, Surtain was tracking Jeudy, but just not to the slot. And so every time he went to the slot, they were creating some big play opportunities down the field. The Browns. The Broncos.
But they were also just calling a ton of zones, right? So even when he followed him, even when he's lined up opposite him, they just ran a dig, and Patrick Surtain's just going, well, I'm sitting here in a zone, have at it. And somebody, how about call some man coverage and put the good corner on him?
This was the worst. I'm going to check out Ben Baldwin, first of all. I want to see where the EPA just lands. I just want to see where it landed with all the swings with Jameis. I bet it ends up as pretty strong. What was the other? The Broncos defense, though. Again, they had the pick sixes and end up, saving the game at the end. This felt like the worst Broncos. I know the Ravens had a lot of success against them a few weeks ago, but this reminded me of the Dolphins' 70 points that they put up. I know that was a lot on the ground and through the air. Tua was 16 for 16 in the first half. This reminded me of those performances from the Broncos defense last year.
I mean, they got cooked. Other than a couple of guys up front. I mean, Nick Bonito had a really good game rushing the passer against those sort of big, heavier, slower offensive tackles for the Browns. Obviously, Bonito was the guy that had the pick six as well. That was a really nice play, by the way. He just kind of slalomed his way. It was almost like, it wasn't even high-low. There were like three consecutive receiving options that were almost in a line vertically, and he sort of slalomed his way between each one, like coming level closer, then eventually found the guy that Jameis was going to try and get the ball to, eventually picked him off, took it back to the house. I mean, Nick Bonito, I thought, had a great game. Outside of that, I mean, that Denver defense was getting roasted, and again, didn't make the adjustment. Like, this guy is just annihilating these soft zones. Maybe we want to change that up a little bit.
I do want to highlight Bonito. We've talked to him a little bit about on the show. I put out the tweet, looked it up. Since week 7, that was kind of a turning point in his season. Bonito's a top 6, top 5 edge rusher in the league. Got right up there with Myles Garrett, Khalil Mack, Trey Hendrickson. All the Steelers non-TJ Watts are up there, Nick Herbig and Alex Highsmith. But Bonito, he was the guy that would kind of have this, I think he's got 11 or 12 sacks now this year. Again, I don't look at those numbers a ton, but he would be the guy like a TJ Watt. He would only have 2 or 3 good rushes a game. He would finish them really well. He's very athletic. He does well against athletic quarterbacks, just finishes plays. But now making plays in coverage, of course, like he did tonight, but also just a lot more quick wins one-on-one and just creating havoc generally. So got in on the quarterback for another sack and A couple other good pass rushes in there. Benito's become a really good player for Denver on a night where, like you said, just wasn't great all around for the defense. Jaquan McMillan had a nice game in the slot, a couple players here and there, but overall Denver's defense picked apart. And like I said, offensively, they've been trying all year, trying to get some consistency from the run game. Jaleel McLaughlin was the guy for Denver. And Bo Nix, I thought early on, Bo Nix throwing the ball pretty well, receivers letting him down on some of his open throws. And that was an absolute strike that he threw to Mims for that 93-yarder. Once again, good to see the big plays that Denver can create with some of their playmakers like Marvin Mims.
Yeah, that pass was a massively high leverage play. Like, he just beat Denzel Ward in that play. And it's a classic Browns defense as well, right? They are walking a tightrope between, like, you have the play where Denzel Ward breaks up the pass intended for Troy Franklin. It pops up, and it was Greg Newsome actually got the interception. Like, you've got that play, and then you've got Denzel Ward going for the pass breakup again on that shot to Mims, just doesn't get there, and that turns into an absolute bomb touchdown. They are walking this constant tightrope, the Browns defense, between like making those pass breakups and those positive coverage plays and not quite making them. And when they don't make them, it tends to be a huge play. Denzel Ward now has 17 pass breakups on the season and got a second interception in that game. So a wild season and game from him. And then he tweaks his calf late on.
I vote to put Jameis into prime time at all times.
All the time. Yeah.
Ironically, the EPA per play per running backs don't matter. Ben Baldwin's site was not that great. Ended up not so hot. I think the last interception probably killed Jameis's numbers. The last one, and not the two pick sixes, but the last one.
Maybe Thursday Night Football should just be the team that Jameis is playing every week, right?
Oh, that'd be great.
Like, Jameis is the fixture on Thursday Night Football, and then we just, whoever the Browns are playing or whoever Jameis's opposition is that week, and that's how we make that. Like, Al would be much better humored if that was his game every week.
Who were you concerned? You remember earlier in the year, you were concerned about Bryce Young. Bryce Young was so bad early in the season. Couldn't even complete a pass. Couldn't do anything. You made the point. They can't even evaluate their entire roster. You can't evaluate the offensive line, the receivers. Jameis should be the evaluator, right? He's the guy. Like, if your pass game's so incompetent, you drop Jameis in there, and all of a sudden Jerry Jeudy's the leading receiver since Jameis took over. He's going to unlock everybody. Now, again, there'll be some turnovers, but you're going to get production. You're going to get a look at your receiving core, your tight ends, and your offensive lines and pass protection.
Who was it we used to call? We used to call somebody the human calibration tool back in the day for exactly this purpose. Like, somebody that could come in and just actually calibrate the rest of your team based off, like, give you a level. And yeah, that's what Andy Dalton did, I think, for Carolina is, all right, let's actually figure out what the rest of this team looks like, because right now Bryce Young is playing so badly that nothing else works or looks good either. You put in Andy Dalton, at least we can get an idea of what the rest of this team looks like. Yeah, I mean, look, I think you had that idea as well, the backup quarterback house, right? Which is, you should actually think about getting onto those, whatever that commercial is. They seem to have almost ripped off your idea.
Progressive may have heard. They must be listeners of the pod, and they turned it into their whole ads. Their whole.
I mean, you might want to have a lawyer look at that. That might be a payout somewhere down the line.
I love that Jacoby Brissett's on those commercials, and he was actually a starter at the beginning of the season. But anyway, carry on.
That's how much he knew what the assignment was, though, is that he was filming that commercial while he was starting for the Patriots, knowing that it was just a matter of time until they sat his ass back down on the bench and made him a backup again. But instead of the backup quarterback house, let's just have a bat phone to Jameis, right? Jameis at all times can just be ready to pick up the phone and go.
I love it. I was looking. He's got to be like in the top 10 in touchdowns and picks now, right? It's like 5 starts into the season for him. He's got to be up there. He's not there yet, but anyway, it's an interesting case because I know we're talking a lot about Jameis Winston, but I mean, average depth of target around the league. We were joking. It's up 0.4 since he took over. Like, legitimately plays the game in a completely different style, and I still believe somewhere deep down there is this world where it's just like you eliminate 3 plays, 4 plays, 5 plays per game from Jameis. And there'll be some misses. Like, he's also a little inaccurate. Like, he just will miss plays because he's aggressive. It's not just the bad decisions. He'll just straight up miss throws because everything's 15 to 25 yards down the field for the most part. So I'll continue to believe that there's a world where the fourth quarter didn't happen.
Huh? It's gonna happen.
The other interesting note in the game here, Denver goes up. Denver's down 1. They have a 4th and less than 1. And it was the first time in Monday Night Football history, Troy Aikman's like, hey, I want to go for it here. And Joe Buck's like, hey, the analytics say don't. They actually say kick it. I thought it was a fascinating decision because the first part is Denver only had 1 timeout. So if they don't get it, you immediately have a slim chance of going for it. And that of getting the ball back. And that's a big part of the models. The timeouts remaining are a huge part of those models. If you have 3 timeouts remaining, I have a feeling it would have said go. The other part, and again, I don't know how much ESPN Analytics has this handy. That was a short one, right? There's a difference between 4th and half a yard, 4th and inches, right, and 4th and the long one, right? Because technically 4th and like a yard and a half counts as 4th and 1. This was a short, like half a yard to go, easier to pick up. It was an interesting decision. Sean Payton lined up for it and then eventually reconsidered. They kicked the field goal, and obviously it turns out it was the right move. The other aspect of that was Hopkins, the Browns kicker. He's been struggling, just kicking the ball as well. I wonder how much that goes into it. So when you think about all of those factors and the reason why you model this out, the reason why because of all those factors, how many timeouts do I have? Who's the quarterback on the other side? Who's the kicker on the other side? How long is the actual down distance to go? Just an interesting decision there by the Broncos.
And we're in Mile High with Denver. We got an extra few yards of range.
Yeah.
Add the distance to it. We can take the shot from a couple of yards further as well. Yeah, it was an interesting call. Troy effectively, like his gut instinct would have been to go for it, but then as soon as he heard any kind of counter argument, it was like, yeah, I guess it makes sense that way too, and just essentially abdicated any opinion on the matter. Joe Buck's initial comment was, amazingly, the analytics say to kick, because he doesn't actually know what the analytics say in any given circumstance. He just believes they always say to go for it.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on that, the analytics don't make decisions. The coaches make decisions. They just have tools at their disposal. They make the final call. The football guy makes the final call. Anything else to wrap this up? Denver, every game's huge for Denver. They're looking for the 7 seed. They're in command of the 7 seed. Yeah, and this, the difference between 8-5 and 7-6 is pretty significant.
As our producer Janko put in the chat, right now, as things stand, it would be Buffalo, Denver in the first round of the playoffs. But there is a world that's a lot closer now than it was at the time where we get Denver, Kansas City in the playoffs. And remember, Denver's the team that causes problems for Kansas City relative. Now, apparently a lot of other teams cause problems for Kansas City as well. But I don't think the Chiefs would love seeing Denver as an early playoff team if that's the way it unfolds.
The rest of Kansas City's schedule, and look, Buffalo could slip up, and Buffalo's also in this position. I think they've won the division, but I think they're going to play the string out because the number 1 seed will be on the line. And my goodness, the difference between playing in Kansas City or Buffalo and having the bye is significant. So I think Buffalo and Kansas City are going to be forced to play it out. Kansas City's got the Chargers this week. Maybe, I don't know if it's their best opportunity to slip up, but they've got Jameis's Browns in Cleveland. So who knows? Who knows what could happen there? And then they have that stretch. That's part of that really short stretch of games where they play the Saturday game against the Texans and then following Wednesday against the Steelers in Pittsburgh on Christmas Day, and then the Broncos the last week. So for a Chiefs team that a lot of people are calling, fraudulent and lucky and this and that or whatever, yes, they've slipped through to win 11 instead of being 9-3 or 8-4. Very easily could be that. Fascinating last 5 weeks, though, for the Chiefs, because they're all probably 3-point games. Once again, close games that could go either way.
Yeah, like the actual kind of wild cards and stuff feel fairly almost wrapped up at this point, but that number one seed charge is going to be interesting to watch down the stretch. Like there might not be that much drama in terms of the actual teams that are going to make the playoffs, but the seeding is going to be interesting.
Yeah, Denver, and then you mentioned weeks ago, if Denver in week 18 could, beats the Chiefs to knock them to the 2 seed, it sets up a rematch the following week in Kansas City. So that's what could be on the line if things we're that close, Sam. We're sitting here. Week 14 is next up, and as always, we'll have a full preview and the whole thing on Thursday. But it's already week 14. We're already talking playoff scenarios.
Let's go.
All right, man. Anything else here? I know the question earlier. Am I bringing Jameis to the Jets? The problem not as my starter, right? I can't have Jameis as I can't have him as my starter. And if I take him as the backup, is he too strong of a personality as the backup? This is what people are wrestling with. Is he too strong as your backup, or is he great as a backup? If I had Jameis throw into John Ross, what do you think happens?
I would imagine the secondary catches as many as John Ross does.
Greatness. No. Who's this? Mohall. He wants Darnold to the Jets. Free agent QB Sam Darnold. I mean, that's worth the whole life. That's worth the whole discussion right now. What do you do with Sam Darnold? It's similar to the Baker Mayfield discussion after he comes off his career year. Do you trust him with a different coach and a different system? The Bucs locked Baker up, even if it's a new coach. Do you trust Sam Darnold to go into the next place? Is that what the Niners should the Niners go to Darnold over Brock Purdy?
Well, I mean, the other question is how much would Minnesota invest in him? Because, okay, obviously JJ McCarthy is their heir apparent, but if you decided Sam Darnold is actually good going forward, you could effectively revert to the Michael Penix Jr. plan. Maybe try and sign Sam Darnold to some kind of mid-tier Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith type of contract, and then have JJ McCarthy as his backup heir apparent successor to transition to or to take over if the wheels fall off, but hedge effectively, try and keep them both.
30 million or so, 35 million of Sam Darnold. We'll call him known commodity, somewhat known commodity in that system. Uh-oh, I just did it. Don't air quote it. This thing's going to blow up. All right, we'll talk about that plenty this offseason. That's it for us right now. We're back again Wednesday. More Check the Mic. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Hit subscribe. Thumbs up.